Matthew 22 is to 1-46. Matthew chapter 22 verse 1. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying. Matthew chapter 22 verse 2. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. Matthew chapter 22 verse 3. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Matthew chapter 22 verse 4. Then he sent some more servants and said, Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet. Matthew chapter 22 verse 5. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. Matthew chapter 22 verse 6. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them and killed them. Matthew chapter 22 verse 7. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Matthew chapter 22 verse 8. Then he said to his servants, The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. Matthew chapter 22 verse 9. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. Matthew chapter 22 verse 10. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. Matthew chapter 22 verse 11. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. Matthew chapter 22 verse 12. He asked, How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend? The man was speechless. Matthew chapter 22 verse 13. Then the king told the attendants, Tie him hand and foot, and throw him outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew chapter 22 verse 14. For many are invited, but few are chosen. Matthew chapter 22 verse 15. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. Matthew chapter 22 verse 16. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others, because you pay no attention to who they are. Matthew chapter 22 verse 17. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Matthew chapter 22 verse 18. But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Matthew chapter 22 verse 19. Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius. Matthew chapter 22 verse 20. And he asked them, Whose image is this? And whose inscription? Matthew chapter 22 verse 21. Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Matthew chapter 22 verse 22. When they heard this, they were amazed. So they left him and went away. Matthew chapter 22 verse 23. That same day the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him with a question. Matthew chapter 22 verse 24. Teacher, they said, Moses told us that if a man dies without having children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for him. Matthew chapter 22 verse 25. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first one married and died, and since he had no children, he left his wife to his brother. Matthew chapter 22 verse 26. The same thing happened to the second and third brother, right on down to the 7th. Matthew chapter 22 verse 27. Finally, the woman died. Matthew chapter 22 verse 28. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be of the 7, since all of them were married to her? Matthew chapter 22 verse 29. Jesus replied, You are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. Matthew chapter 22 verse 30. At the resurrection people will neither marry nor be given in marriage, they will be like the angels in heaven. Matthew chapter 22 verse 31. But about the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what God said to you? Matthew chapter 22 verse 32. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead but of the living. Matthew chapter 22 verse 33. When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Matthew chapter 22 verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. Matthew chapter 22 verse 35. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Matthew chapter 22 verse 36. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Matthew chapter 22 verse 37. Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Matthew chapter 22 verse 38. This is the first and greatest commandment. Matthew chapter 22 verse 39. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew chapter 22 verse 40. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Matthew chapter 22 verse 41. While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them. Matthew chapter 22 verse 42. What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? The son of David, they replied. Matthew chapter 22 verse 43. He said to them, How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, calls him Lord? For he says. Matthew chapter 22 verse 44. The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. Matthew chapter 22 verse 45. If then David calls him Lord, how can he be his son? Matthew chapter 22 verse 46. No one could say a word in reply, and from that day on no one dared to ask him any more questions.